welcome to Debating Metal and a belated Merry Christmas to everyone. Thank you for checking out today's episode. My name is Kenneth Dean, the Dean of Metal, and my co-host is Chris K. For today's final episode of the year, we're taking you back to a time when music was sleazy, it was sexual, satanic, and made you do things your mother warned you not to do. No, we're not taking you back to last week. We're taking you all the way back to 1985 and revisiting the PMRC's Filthy 15.
37 years ago, the original Karens, Tipper Gore, Susan Baker, Sally Nevius, and Pam Hauer, a group of Washington, D.C. wives, formed the PMRC, or Parents Music Resource Center. They famously made a list that basically became every rebellious kid's playlist, 15 songs that they deemed were the most offensive songs of that time. The list included some of music's biggest stars and some cult underground acts that we'll talk about today. Their objective was for music albums to be rated in a similar way to that of Hollywood films.
X for profane or sexually explicit, V for violent, O for occult references, and DA or D/A for drugs or alcohol-related lyrics. In the end, it was just S for stupid. Bowing down to pressure from Washington, the Record Industry Association of America, better known as the RIAA, convinced record labels to affix a sticker on potentially offensive albums, and the sticker read, Parental Advisory, Explicit Lyrics. Wow, what a mess this turned into at the time. I lived through it. So I was there. I wasn't in Washington, but I was there. You were not.
No, but I definitely felt the effects of it because anything that had a parental advisory explicit lyrics label was deemed cool, and everyone wanted that. It didn't matter. Nobody wanted the version that was the clean lyrics or whatever. It was like a badge of honor to have albums with that sticker on it. And so it was the complete opposite effect of what the PMRC wanted, and it was great.
Well, it's funny because I remember when it was all going down and, like Motley Crue's album, Shout at the Devil, they put, it wasn't even a sticker like they put on albums now, the black and white sticker. It was just like a little round or oval, kind of like a racetrack oval, and it said, warning, parental advisory or something like that. It didn't even say anything like bad lyrics, and it's like, and it was the same color as the album stuff. I was like, this is really weird. Like this label doesn't do anything. First of all, I'm at the time, 1985, I'm 16 years old and I'm thinking that this is just a friggin' mess that's going on right now. But slowly, in 86 and 87, you began to see the black and white label show up, especially in 1987. That's, I think, really where it took off. And now all of a sudden you're putting this big, bold black and white sticker, and like you said, it became a badge of honor to find that and get that album. Or in the case of a lot of high schoolers, it was one of those things where you had to get your parents' permission to buy. When I was working at the record store in Miami, like rap records that had that, if you looked like you were under 16 or 18 or something like that, where's your mom? Is your mom here? Because we need to get her permission to sell this to you. We were not allowed to sell to anyone. I don't know if it was 16 or 18. And it was just crazy. And this is probably 6-7 years after this whole thing started. So it was a weird experience going through that. But at the same time, I loved it all because, hey, that just meant, this one must be really bad.
I mean, I just remember even kids wearing parental advisory explicit content shirts to school, like when I was in middle school, high school. So it was cool, and it was the thing. I'm so amused, and I know we're going to talk about it with some of the different songs and the people that testified in the hearings. But I just really found it so funny that it was pretty much the opposite effect of what they wanted. So good.
Yeah. I actually have a parental advisory sticker on my microphone. And I had a shirt like that back in the day too. I had it more for college. So when I don't know if I got it my senior year of high school and wore it mostly in college or what. I can't remember, but I do remember having that shirt. And I liked it. I don't know what happened to it. But anyway, so what we're going to do today is we're going to go over the 15 songs. Now, as most of you may or may not know, not all of them are metal songs, so we're going to glaze over as quickly as possible the non-metal songs, and then kind of dive in a little more into the songs that we know about. But we are going to reference and talk about each song as they come along. So, I think you went first last week, so I'll go first this week. All right.
I mean, for this, as far as like the pop songs, I think we just kind of lump them into a group and kind of chat about them, I guess.
We could. The two that stand out the most to me are going to be Prince and Madonna because they're the biggest names. Mm-hmm. So I have a little bit more to say about them, but we can talk about, Vanity with Strap On Robbie Baby and, Cyndi Lauper with She Bop and Sheena Easton with Sugar Walls. And what's the other one? Mary Jane Girls with In My House. I don't understand. I mean, I do. You listen, you look at the words and you understand why they were up in arms, I guess, like that. But the funny thing about it is that one of the artists that got picked on during this time period was Dionne Warwick. Now,
yeah,
for all the people who know Dionne Warwick, I mean, she's an R&B singer. She's super famous for being really, really good singer, doing some really good music during her heyday. But let's be honest. The songs, while the lyrics were not offensive, the lyrics themselves were direct and to the point. We're going to make love. Whatever the fuck it said. It was straight up, hey, you and me, we're going to bump uglies tonight. Okay? And that was the way, but she had a way of saying it. Tom Jones. All those singers that did love songs. What do you think they were? What do you think love songs are, people? And
but it wasn't so graphic in nature, I guess.
No,
and that's what.
But Dionne Warwick, even not being graphic, got picked on, and one of her songs ended up like on the second 15 or something like that.
Yeah,
and it's just like, what? It was. That's how dumb it was. And She Bop from Cyndi Lauper and Strap On Robbie Baby from Vanity and Sheena Easton Sugar Walls. Those are kind of obvious. I mean, the titles kind of lend itself to kind of understanding what's going to happen or what's going on in the song. I get that.
I mean, yes, and several of them were about masturbation. So I mean, it was a little bit explicit, not 100%. I would say, obviously, today's lyrics are much worse. You have songs like WAP, that just eclipse this. But I mean, like Cyndi Lauper, yeah, she's obviously not metal, but she was associated with things like wrestling, that kind of, not necessarily counterculture because wrestling was more mainstream at that time, but, more of the rowdy kind of stuff. And he has songs like Sugar Walls. I mean, I would directly compare that to WAP, But
you see, but the difference is Sugar Walls is a nice way to say it.
Much, much nicer. And that's why I'm saying compare them.
Right.
Because it's funny how they got upset about this. She probably had a stroke when she heard WAP.
One of those chicks had a freaking stroke, I tell you.
Oh, yeah.
Now, when you get into, Prince and Madonna, these at the time, Prince, when this song Darling Nikki came out, that was on the soundtrack for Purple Rain. Prince was already famous at that point, and he was a pretty big star, but he wasn't as big as he was after Purple Rain came out. And I remember hearing this song because I have the soundtrack. I have the album on vinyl, the original release type of pressing and stuff like that, and this song's on there, and it was one of those like. It's got this really interesting groove to it, very slow, and all of a sudden, I knew a girl named Nikki, Was it? I knew a girl named Nikki. I guess you could say she. Oh yeah, I guess you could say she was a sex fiend, right? And it goes on from there. And when I heard, that he caught her masturbating with a magazine, I'm like, wow, that's the first time I've heard that. I'm like, this is, and I didn't think of it as this is going to get banned kind of thing. But at the same time, I was like, well, this is never getting on the radio. That was one of my first thoughts. But it was a cool song, and there were other songs on the album that I knew were going to be radio hits. So it was one of those things where you kind of kept that song, because if you knew that your parents were not going to like it, you kept that song quiet. So it's funny that they would end up picking this song and putting it on the list, because for the one lyric, it's kind of obvious, and even I kind of had that hesitation about listening to it out loud when certain people were around. So it's interesting how that worked out.
Yeah, I probably would not have listened to that with my parents.
No.
But, yeah. So, Madonna, I mean, I've never been a fan. I kind of missed that whole boat. But, obviously she was a huge star and still is, but she had my most, I guess, experience with seeing her was in like the early, I guess late 80s, early 90s, when she was kind of on like Saturday Night Live appearances with Wayne's World. That I kind of associated her with hard rock music in that way, where her music wasn't hard rock at all, but she was kind of in that same culture, I guess, because of her explicit pictures, her image, etc. So I mean, the Dress You Up song, Like a Virgin, all that stuff, like it was just all about her sexuality, and I can see why that would upset these PMRC ladies.
What was funny about Dress You Up, that was like, I mean, it wasn't as huge a hit as some of the other songs that she's had, but it was a mainstream hit. Mm-hmm. And it's a catchy tune, but it's just funny because, you mentioned how she was rock and roll, rock and roll being the counterculture, right? And her counterculture was so counter that it literally came back around and became the culture. Yeah. That's the way, that's the kind of influences she had. And, I never got on the Madonna boat. Okay. I didn't buy a ticket. I didn't do anything, and I remember when I was moving to Miami, and some friends of mine knew that I was moving, and I was, I don't know if I showed up at their house and I'm listening to a metal song in my car, and the guy comes up to me, he's like, dude, you got to stop listening to that stuff. You need to start listening to like Madonna and Michael Jackson. I'm like, for what? He goes, if you expect to get any chicks, you got to listen to that kind of music. Otherwise, you're not going to get anything. I'm like, yeah, I'll stick to what I listen to, and I'll get whatever I get, kind of thing. I was like, hey, I'm not listening to Madonna. No way.
No, thank you. I'm good.
And this guy who's telling me this is this chubby, tall, black dude, right? And he's telling me this, and I'm like, seriously, man, are you really telling me this? Because there's just no way that I am going to ever listen to Michael Jackson and Madonna on any sort of regular basis so I can get a chick. No, it's just not happening. But
anyway. It worked for some people, but
it works for some, right?
I have a little bit more integrity than that. So. Mary Jane Girls, I don't really know this song. It's one of those. Did you have any experience with that?
I'm pretty sure it played in the background of someplace I was at, but no, I don't know much about the Mary Jane Girls or their song.
I think that's probably enough said about the pop songs on this list.
Right, so. Exactly. So that's the end of the pop section.
Good deal. So how about let's go into one you don't like very much from probably your favorite AC/DC album. Let Me Put My Love Into You.
All right. So as I mentioned in the intro, all the songs had a rating, or they were trying to get them rated, so a lot of the songs we talked about were rated X for sexually explicit or profane lyrics. This one was in that list. Let Me Put My Love Into You. Okay, not profane, because there's no foul language, right? So that's the definition of profanity, right? Sexually explicit. It's one of those jokes that you sit there and say, get your mind out of the gutter. Because where's your mind if you immediately see a lyric and you say, oh, well, let me put my love into you. Yeah, we know what that's about. Yeah, because our mind's in the gutter to begin with. But, it's not obvious. And it's not one of these things that just kind of like, it's not, first of all, it's the 10th song on the album. Right? Or the fifth? No, I'm sorry. It was the 5th song on the album because I was
going to say it's earlier than 10. Yeah.
No, it's just I always think that the side that starts with Back in Black was side 1, but it's actually side 2. So Let Me Put My Love Into You is the 5th song on the album. It's right there in the middle, but it's not a hit. It is probably the deepest track on the album. Okay, so for these people to sit there and go to the end of a side of a record or a tape, one or the other, and sit there and say, oh, we've just got past Hell's Bells, giving the dog a bone. What do you do for money, honey? I mean, tell me, giving a dog a bone, and what do you do for money, honey? Tell me they're not more explicit than Let Me Put My Love Into You.
No, I guarantee you those ladies were listening to it and they're like, oh, it's a nice song about giving a dog a bone.
Yeah, okay. So that right there just tells me how stupid they are. Okay? And then if you flip the record over, the song that's blatantly obvious about drugs and alcohol, Have a Drink on Me. Oh, okay, or shake a leg. Jesus Christ. It's like, come on, how much more can the rest of the album be more explicit than Let Me Put My Love Into You? Just because it's your love into you, so you kind of have an idea of what's going on there. By picking that song, it showed how ignorant they were about the rest of the album. It made no sense to me, and you couldn't take the PMRC seriously because of things like that.
For sure. I mean, but they had to pick a song off of it. I guess they just picked what they felt was the most explicit. I just think it's silly.
Well, they didn't have to. I mean, there was probably more explicit songs on Highway to Hell. I mean, think Highway to Hell. They could have picked that song.
True.
They could have picked Go Down from Let There Be Rock.
They could probably pick most AC/DC songs.
Exactly. That's what makes no sense. They could have picked Big Balls from Dirty Deeds. I mean, that would... come on.
They probably just thought it was about, like some bouncy balls.
Big parties, something. Right. Exactly. Yeah. What's your thoughts on the AC/DC thing?
I mean, pretty much the same. Like, pick any AC/DC song. They just picked one that sounded the dirtiest, I guess. There's probably a couple that were contenders for the same thing, but maybe just because those specific lyrics, or the song title sounds dirty. Let's be honest. That's fine. So they just picked what they thought, or maybe the first song they pointed to on the back of the album. I don't know.
Yeah, imagine, it almost sounds like they just threw a dart and said, "Well, which one of these 10 songs are we going to pick?"
Yeah, essentially.
All right, so what are you going to pick now?
I mean, let's talk about Def Leppard, High and Dry. Not exactly the song that I would think would trigger them, but I guess lines like, I got my whiskey, I got my wine, I got my woman. Like, how is that even that bad?
Let me put my love into you, babe.
I don't understand how High and Dry is that bad.
It's not. And that's the whole reason. Like Def Leppard, I mean, these bands, these artists just, for the most part, all ignored what was going on, except for a couple, and we're going to talk about one a little bit later. It's just, it made no sense. And that was the biggest thing, because people were like, oh yeah, this song, that song. No, it made no sense. I mean, shit, I like that album. That's my favorite Def Leppard album.
Yeah, I mean, we've discussed it before, didn't we? We did a head-to-head on it.
Yep.
So, of all the songs on the list, this to me merits being on the list one of the least. I don't understand. Like, if you're gonna pick explicit content, or you're gonna pick sexual content or whatever, just saying I've got my whiskey and I got my wine is not that bad. Like, yeah, drug and alcohol references, I guess, is what they were targeting on that one, and they're like, kids. They don't want kids to think it's cool or something like that. Well, again, that's really up to parenting. But I
Whiskey in the gyro.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was one thing after another. It just made less and less sense.
I mean, I guess that transitions well into Black Sabbath with Trashed. Again, another song about alcohol, specifically about a car crash.
His own car crash.
It's from an era of Black Sabbath that I personally like. I think in hindsight, a lot of people do like that album. I think it's a really awesome song, but I never, like, as somebody that was listening to it, especially around the time I started driving, I didn't think, oh, that's really awesome, I want to go crash my car. Like, what was the thought process that these people had?
That's another thing that, to this day, you really can't sit there and decipher what was it that they were trying to accomplish. I mean, obviously, yes, they're trying to protect the children. They're trying to keep them safe from harmful lyrics that's going to melt their ears, and it's going to sink into their hearts and going to turn them evil. And dude, the funny thing about that is that as a parent now, I try to sit there and say, okay, what should I and should I not tell my kids? You know what? I remember I was 8 years old, and that's when I started to learn how to curse and say fuck and fuck you and motherfucker and all that shit. And
a lot of variation there.
Exactly. And it's like, but I'm not going to go home and sit there and say, what's up, Mom? Fuck you. You're not going to do that.
Shit, I don't know if I'd have ever walked again.
Exactly. You get your ass beat for an hour, and then come up for more, and then they look at you again and they slap you silly. No, you weren't going to do that. So the whole protection thing it's fine and fantastic, and it's in theory a good idea. But for the most part, we all know that being overprotective and overbearing doesn't get you anything other than a lot of rebellion. So
that's 100% true.
I don't know what, I remember listening to the song Trash, and the thing is, what people don't understand is you got to let people have a mind of their own. So are they really going to see a video with some guys racing and think, oh, I want to go ahead and drink myself into oblivion and then crash into a wall? Probably not. But hey, there are a few loose screws out there, there's some people that, and we see them every day on TikTok. It's just, there's some people with some loose screws out there. So, you can't save everybody from themselves. That's for sure.
Oh, well, they can definitely try. It doesn't matter what you believe. Somehow people are pushing their agendas on everybody else and their thoughts, and you have to live the way I think you live. Well, that was totally against the spirit of rock and roll and the spirit of metal. So I'm glad to be a metalhead.
Yes,
so
I am.
Let's move on to one that let's do Motley Crue with Bastard. I mean, the album cover has some really pretty ladies on it.
Well,
Shout at the Devil had this upside down star on it.
It has the pentagram on
pentagram.
it. Now they're on the guys are on the back, and they don't look so much like ladies. They're more like they look like really bad cosplay Native Americans. Okay, with the little stripes under the eyes. It's really, really bad cosplay.
I didn't ever equate it with Native Americans. I always thought it was like post-apocalyptic football players.
Okay, I can see that too.
Like something out of a Mad Max movie. I never once thought Native American, but that's interesting. Because they had like
just
kind
the
of
face,
shoulder pads and
but once you look at the whole costume, because the back of the album is just the four faces.
Yeah.
So you just see them with the makeup on and the stripes on their face and stuff like that. But once you see the whole outfit, then the post-apocalyptic the post-apocalyptic the post-apocalyptic vibe makes more sense.
Yeah, my point was though, I guess it fooled the women into thinking that and I mean the women of the PRC, they see these four attractive looking, lady men on there, and they're like, "Wow, this looks like a nice album. Let me listen." Oh my goodness, Bastard! of all the songs on the album, Bastard, yeah, sure, why not? Because it's a dirty name, or a bad name, I guess, per se. Because it's what a bastard is a child that doesn't know their father. So yeah, I assume they probably took it at surface level for the word and went there. I don't know. There's other songs from Motley Crue they could have picked easily.
Well, I mean, the other thing too is it was rated V for violent. It had a lot to do with the lyrics. Was it "Out go the lights, in go the knife, out goes your life"? Consider that bastard dead or something like that. So I mean, it is blatantly violent, and there's no two ways about it. But again, it's one of those things. It's a deep track. It's not a single. It's not one that was on the radio. So, you're attracted, or someone sees the name Bastard, and okay, now what is this? All right, so you are attracted to the title. Now you want to turn it on. Why? What is it that triggered you? What are you looking for? And that was the thing. Like, a regular person is just going to put it on an album. It's going to listen to the song, say, "Oh, it's a catchy little ditty," and
I'm picturing somebody like, "Ooh, this is a catchy little ditty, Bastard."
Right. So but the PMRC was, "Oh, Bastard, let's listen to this one." Boom, they go straight to track 4 on the album. It's like, or 3, whatever it may have been at the time. It's like, people don't do that.
I kind of wish there was footage of them listening to it and just the reactions, like, "Oh my goodness."
Now, at the same time, I mean, this is the album that had the pentagram on the front. Okay, I get it. It kind of, stands out. Says, "Hey, look at me! I got the pentagram on the front."
It worked.
It did. It worked. But you know what? Here's the thing. 2 things. One, if the songs suck, no one. It doesn't matter if it's got freaking a set of hanging balls off of it. No one's gonna fucking buy it. Okay. 2, if you don't bring attention to it, no one's gonna buy it. So the PMRC brought attention to it, but at the flip side, Motley Crue, it was a good album. So there's those are the 2 things that go to it. So if you don't bring attention to it, no one's going to notice unless it's good. And it was good. Regardless of Bastard, it was a good album. It's, to me, my favorite Motley Crue album. But they had to pinpoint one song and make it even that much more popular.
Yeah, it probably helped that track because it brought attention to it. Not necessarily one of the best on the album, not one of the worst either, but giving it that prestige of being on this list helps it. So, thank you, PMRC.
Yep, exactly. Thank you. All right, so now I'm going to put 2 songs. I'm going to lump them both together because they're both rated O for occult.
Okay.
And we're talking about Venom and the song Possessed off of the Possessed album from 1985, as well as Merciful Fate's Into the Coven, which was off of their debut album that was released 2 years prior to the PMRC getting involved. So both were O for occult, which basically means that, they had occult or satanic references, and they didn't want their kids to get possessed by Satan and start listening to all this crazy music and then end up going to a Slayer concert. Okay. So the asinine back asswards thinking that these people had is astonishing to me.
Beyond.
I mean, think about it. So they only picked one song out of Merciful Fate, and they picked Possessed from Venom. Mind you, did they forget about the entire career of Venom up to this point? Because this is 1985. Venom's already 5 years in, and this is their fourth album, I think it was. Did you miss black metal? Did you miss Welcome to Hell? Did you miss At War with Satan? I mean, come on, really? So you're gonna pick Possessed? Someone must have watched The Exorcist, or they must have watched the Amityville Horror, or Damien Omen 3, or Damien Omen 2, excuse me. And now, all these things about Satan, they're bad. It's evil. I'm going to get possessed, and my head's going to spin backwards, and I'm going to spit, bile chunks at a priest.
Well,
come on.
My theory is they saw At War with Satan, and they're like, "Oh, that's nice." They're battling Satan, and then they also saw that the track was almost 20 minutes, and they were like, "That's too long to listen to." So, so they moved on from there. But yeah, I mean,
they should have listened to the one that was on Welcome to Hell, which was only the intro, and it was about 3 minutes long.
Yeah. It's flawed logic, but I get where they're coming from with trying to narrow down and pick one that specifically bothers them, I guess. I don't know. I mean, nowadays, right, you can put something into a search engine and you can look up, or even a word search in your Microsoft Word or whatever, and look up lyrics to try to find something that bothers you. And I'm pretty sure that's what a lot of people do today, is just try to find things that bother them. But some of the lyrics are make love with a dying whore, I drink from the vomit of priests, things like that. Like, I get where they're coming from, but at the same time, but like, it's not really any different than watching a horror movie. And that's what amuses me about like these different things. Like, people can go, well, I don't see how a movie can affect people, watching people blow up and stuff, and then you see a video game do the same thing, and they lose their freaking minds. It's the same thing with music. Music, it bothered them in a way that, watching a movie like Dracula, where a guy is what do you call it? Like, he didn't possess the girls, but like he entranced them to come to the window and drink their blood and stuff like that. It's not any different. It's just in lyrical form, and I guess they let their imaginations get away with them. So I never saw dark music as anything different than watching a horror movie.
And you have a more understanding of your mind, and you don't allow things to influence you that way. I'm the same way. But the funny thing is that they picked these two songs. It's, like, are you forgetting, and talking about them, like, they're forgetting the fact that, like I said, Venom had a career of 3 other prior albums, right? Merciful Fate, yes, this is their debut album, but there's shit all over, Satan's Fall, the last song on the album, but what makes it even stranger, you mentioned it in the intro, these are underground cult bands. Okay. First of all, I'm amazed that they found Merciful Fate. Okay. Let's put it that way, because Merciful Fate's not mainstream. Venom is not mainstream. So they're not selling millions of albums. Both of these albums are on independent labels. So you have to get them at an independent record store because you're not going to go to Sam Goody or Camelot in the mall and wow, I'm showing my age there and find these albums. You might have a good, like maybe one of those mall stores that kind of have their own independence from the rest of the chain that has a buyer in store that buys cool stuff like that. You know, sometimes the local, the people that live there kind of demand those kinds of things. But I want to know how they found Merciful Fate. You know, I can understand Venom. I guess Venom was a little more popular, but Merciful Fate, you know, they weren't that big.
Yeah.
So it made no sense to me at all.
I mean, yeah, that's kind of an interesting perspective because I didn't really think about that as far as the accessibility of some of these, especially with a band that comes from a different part of the world. They were released in the U.S. though, right? Like they had
No, they were released in the U.S. I mean, it was on Roadrunner Records for Merciful Fate. Venom, I believe, was on Combat, so they were distributed by Important Records, which is the same people that distributed Megaforce. It's just one of those things. You had to go to an independent record store, especially back then in 1985. Okay, it wasn't like you could go to a mall store and sit there and say, "Hey," I mean, don't get me wrong. Yes, you could.
Yeah.
Most mall stores were not going to carry this, but like I said, it all depended on the population in the area. If a city, like let's say like Detroit, which is known for liking their heavy metal, you cater to your audience. So yes, there may be a situation where they purchase more of the independent stuff, you know, because the buyers at the main office, there's always going to be one independent buyer, you know, because independent music is obviously, there's a lot of good stuff out there. So, you know, but you're not going to flood the market. I mean, so if you walk in 1985, and I don't even know who's big at that point. I don't know if Bruce Springsteen's Born in the USA album came out yet or not, but that's a huge album. The Police are huge at this point, right? Mm-hmm. So you go into a record store, you're going to see a shit ton of Synchronicity albums, you know, 30, 40 copies. But you're only going to find one of Merciful Fate. You're only going to find one of Venom's Possessed, if you find it.
Yeah, I got you.
And so that's one of those things where it's like you really had to go out of your way to find this.
So there's one thing I wanted to mention. So there was a quote from King who said, "The whole thing was just pathetic. We thought they must be really bored to have time for this." Excuse me. "We thought they must be really bored to have time for this. How they saw those songs, it said more about them than it did about us." And I really found that to be pretty topical for the time, because I really feel that people are the same way now, where they're just bored, they're complacent, they just want to complain for the sake of complaining, and they're always looking for something that bothers them. And this is a perfect example of that in that time period. These are people that had probably more than their fair share of good fortune, and they're going out of their way to make other people miserable. Like they want them to be miserable in their lives, you know, by inflicting their beliefs on other people. And it's really common today. I mean, with cancel culture, etc. This is just an early form of that. They weren't trying to just put a rating system on this music. They were trying to destroy these people's careers. Just to be 100% honest, because without radio play, without MTV play, etc., like they wouldn't have had the influence, they wouldn't have had the opportunity to be successful. And that's really what bothers me about it, and how relevant it is today.
Oh, I agree with you completely, because I'm sitting here. There are times when I get exasperated with the things that I read and the attitude that is prevailing from all these articles I read. And I sit there and go, am I going through that I can't remember what that time period was called with the satanic panic. Am I going through that satanic panic again? Maybe not so much in terms of Satan in general, with the way it was so popular in the 80s, all the, like the Damians and the Omens and Amityville Horror and Nightmare on Elm Street and all that stuff. Today it's a different kind of panic. And like, what was it, last year or in 2020, they were having the book bannings. Mm-hmm. I mean, that shit happened in the 80s. Book bannings. It happened in the 60s. So it's every 20 something years? Who knows? It's insane to think about how we keep circling the wagon. Mm-hmm. We keep going, we're circling I don't even say the wagon, we're circling the mountain, because you know why? You can't see through the mountain to see what's on the other side to protect yourself from stupidity. Okay, you go around the mountain, you come back again, and you say, "Oh, here we're back where we started again," and it's like, duh.
Pretty much.
I completely agree with you. It's just this whole the cancel culture thing, and it's always been, it's funny that the people who speak. So, and it's weird because it happens on both sides of the aisle. So we're not gonna play politics here. But the people scream the loudest, sitting there saying, "Oh, you can't do that. Free speech. You can't do that." And the same people who are screaming free speech are trying to shut other people down. The other people who don't want to hear the free speech are still doing the same thing and trying to shut the people down. So it's just it's a weird circle of fucking idiots.
It's funny how these people have so much in common, but they just have the politics not in common, right? But right. The way they're going about doing things, and they're accusing each other of the same things, yet they don't have the insight, or they don't have the what's the word I'm looking for? They don't see themselves and other people. Like, they don't have the ability to empathize on that level, so they don't realize that the people they're accusing are doing the same exact thing as they are, because there's just an arrogance, a level of narcissism in society right now. But regardless,
the narcissism, man, since the invention of
social media,
camera phones, because I'm not going to sit there and say iPhones, because other phones have got cameras on them. It's just ever since camera phones were invented, the narcissism has risen, like 1,000,000%, if you want to look at it that way.
Yeah,
it's insane.
There's a discussion that we could have for hours on this, because of studies that were done, and actually studies that were dropped off the map because it was silenced, because there was so much depression that was rising in teenagers that were using smartphones. But regardless, we're here to talk about metal. So we got a few more songs on this list. So we got through the occult. Let's go into how should we describe this one? More sexual song, I guess. "Eat Me Alive" by Judas Priest. Off of the Defenders of the Faith album, one of my favorite Priest albums. I think it's a little bit underrated, honestly, because it's every bit as good as some of the others, but it just kind of gets overlooked for what it is. But this particular song and a couple others, like, I guess they missed what Jawbreaker was about. But "Eat Me Alive," "Rod of Steel," "Grown in the Pleasure Zone," "Oral Sex at Gunpoint," oral sex at gunpoint is, let me rephrase that, is the thing that Tipper Gore said the song was about. That's not true. The song is just more about kind of rough sex. So what did you think about it?
Okay, so if if you're gonna pick one song that epitomizes everything that the PMRC was trying to do, this one kind of stands out. Says, "Who pick me?"
Kind of, yeah.
I mean, this one's not hiding anything. And when you and I both, I don't know if you listened to Rob's or read Rob's book. I listened to it.
I listened to it. Yeah, I did before you did, but
right. He basically said that he was writing lyrics just to get shit out of his system, and this was one of those things he needed to get out of his system. So there was nothing that that Rob was hiding in this particular song, but he did a great job of being able to play with the words to make it what it was, And look, like I said, this song screamed everything that the PMRC was crying about. But at the same time, I listened to this song for years. I kind of knew what "Eat Me Alive" meant. Well, not kind of. I knew what "Eat Me Alive." It doesn't bother me. I sang along. "Eat me alive." It just sounds
cool.
God damn it!
To me, like some of these songs, yes, you can analyze it and you can figure out what everything means, or you can just sing along because it sounds badass.
Exactly.
I never really thought about something like Jawbreaker. I didn't sit there and pick the song apart, but if you really listen to it, yeah, you can figure it out. But it also just sounds awesome. So
yeah, I never at any point did I ever think about the sexual connotations and it being a homosexual song.
Oh, but it doesn't even matter. It's not really. Yes, in his context it is, but
exactly.
The song has no lyrics that specifically say that whatsoever, or
exactly.
even
but
point
because
to that.
Rob is later.
Yeah, but
right.
Again, it doesn't matter because Rob wrote songs that could apply to anybody, or
exactly.
he spent time writing songs about mythical heroes and stuff like that. If not that, so again, music is so up to interpretation, and we can take it at the level that the writer of the song says, like exactly what their meaning is, but songs can have meaning to you as well. And so that's
Absolutely.
something that's really overlooked, and it's the same thing with poetry, right? Poetry. I remember being in school and arguing with a teacher I had that she was analyzing, or we were analyzing poetry in the class, and she was talking about the meaning behind it, and asking the class what it was, and I said, no, well, like this is what it means to me, and they're like, no, there's only one meaning. No, and everything is up to interpretation. Yes, obviously the original writer can have something, but not everything affects you in the same way. Just like if I watch a film or I read a book, it may apply to me in a different way than it does to you, and that's what's so crazy about this is that like they're trying to censor these songs, and yes, they may be about explicit content and stuff like that, but certainly nothing compared to what we hear today. And it's up to a parent to decide what their kid is going to listen to. And I know that's even up for debate today because there's certain people that want their kid to not have or their parents to not have influence on their children. It just I don't know. Society is degrading.
No, I get what you're saying there. Like I said, this song was pretty bullseye on the target for that one, and we can't say one thing or another that they picked the wrong song because they picked the right one.
This one's pretty,
again,
pretty much on the nose.
Right, exactly. But again, like I said, you and I both had the same thing. We didn't care what the song was about. It was a cool song, and that's most of the time what is the deal with most of this music.
Very true.
Okay, so that we have two songs left, and so we're gonna the next one we're gonna talk about is kind of the band that really was a big target for this and was one of the first artists to be point or singled out, and this is the ever famous Wasp, "Animal, I Fuck Like a Beast."
I don't see how that could possibly upset them.
Neither do I, and I'm thinking, the copy I have didn't even have the saw blade. I had one that was just a clear cover, and it was a gold record. Literally, that's all it was, and it just said sticker, "Animal, I Fuck Like a Beast." This song, I tell you what, the fact that it was banned everywhere just gave me so much interest in, like, I want to hear this because I had never heard it. I heard Wasp's first album, but I had not heard that song, "Animal." And when I finally heard it, I was like, "Ooh, this is a cool song," because it was a good song.
Yeah, regardless of the lyrics, it still has a really good tune. It's very, like, catchy. So, it works. I like it a lot.
Yeah, I mean, it's got a great riff.
I was so glad we got to hear it live.
Yes, we did. Finally. Got to see Wasp after 40-something years. This song is just one of those that it is catchy, like you said. It's got a really cool melody, and it's one of those things where you can't really say it out loud in some circumstances and situations, but for the most part, it's a cool song. I remember trying to get it. I remember the biggest thing about this song was cool. I had mentioned before, WXRK in New York City, where I lived at the time in the mid 80s, had started a radio show called Heavy Metal from Hell. It started, I believe, at the end of 86, and I have the first ever show on audio. I actually transferred it over to a CD. And the first song, so Mark Didia was the disc jockey, the radio show host, and he literally goes through the intro of the show, and he goes, "We're going to start the show the way it was supposed to start, or the way it should start," something to that effect. And he throws this song on, and I'm waiting 30, 45 seconds to get to that chorus. Is it going to play? Is he going to say fuck? He said fuck. Oh my God. I couldn't believe it was being played on the radio. It was the coolest thing.
It just excited you so much that you hit your mic stand.
I did. I kicked the table. It was one of those things where I couldn't believe that they were saying that on the air, because I knew that was a bad word that weren't supposed to say on the radio, and to get to hear it on the radio was pretty cool. So, but at that time I already had the record, and like I said, it was a gold. It's just weird. It was, it's not. They weren't trying to represent a gold record per se, like an award. It was just happened to be, and it wasn't gold vinyl. It was like a sheet of gold inside the vinyl, kind of thing. Really weird. I got to pull it out and take a look at it, and I'll show you about it. But anyway, so I have it. So I don't have the one with the label, or not the label. I don't have the one with the album cover that has the buzzsaw, the saw blade. I do have it on CD though, but vinyl, I just have that gold one.
So for me, this one was one that I didn't hear until, I want to say, high school. I wasn't really aware of Wasp until around that time, and I remember hearing it and just thinking it was really cool. Of course, by that time, I want to say I had it on a burned CD, because I had the main album, the original album, and I had what was the second album called? Jeez,
Inside the Electric Service.
No,
The Last
Command was the second album. Command. So I had those two, but I didn't have that song, and I didn't know why I didn't have that song. So you had to find it in other ways. So yeah, it was really cool. I guess by that point I had heard other songs that had the same kind of content, so the effect on me was a bit different, but yeah, regardless, I can definitely see why it was on the list and why it was targeted. I mean, the title was just begging to be targeted, so.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, I guess that leaves just one last song on our list. And I think this is a band that probably had the most effect on the PMRC due to the hearings and them not really expecting a metalhead or a metal vocalist, a metal songwriter to have a brain in his head. And that was Twisted Sister. Dee Snider famously came in and was extremely professional, extremely respectful, and spoke eloquently at the hearing and really just destroyed everything they had to say. And it was incredible. If you haven't seen that, it's available on YouTube pretty much anywhere. Awesome to see. And it's on a lot of metal documentaries too, because it's such a win for the metal community.
It was important, and it was a huge moment for the metal community. And funny enough, though, everybody was behind D, but nobody wanted to stand behind D. And so he bit the bullet. Very similar to Lars Ulrich and Metallica when they had the whole Napster thing. Someone had to take the bullet. He decided to do it. So in Dee's case, he went to Washington and he spoke eloquently and he spoke intelligently, and he astonished all these old farts in the Senate and just really, or actually in Congress, just the whole congressional hearing things was just, it was for the most part a sham. I mean, they brought in John Denver, because that was the other thing. John Denver was one of the people that were picked out because of Rocky Mountain High. And that was going to get labeled D/A for drugs.
See, and as a kid, I never would have equated it with drugs. Like, I just thought it was like, up in the Rocky Mountains. Like, I really didn't think of it that way until I got older. And it's so funny how adults will push that on kids thinking they think the same way, not realizing they're just innocent. So you're protecting the children from what?
Exactly. So then, then Frank Zappa, I don't even remember what song Frank Zappa was picked on for, but I'm pretty sure there's lots of them in his catalog. So he spoke eloquently, but he's extremely intelligent, but I think his intelligence was so far and above everybody else's in the room that everyone just, everyone in Congress was kind of like just stupefied. Really, and then Dee Snider comes in and lays down. Now he has that New York attitude. He had the New York accent. He tried to downplay his accent as much as possible, because that was before his radio career took off. So it was awesome, And the fact is, the one song that we're talking about is "We're Not Gonna Take It," that was off of the Stay Hungry album. That's they misunderstood, they misconstrued the lyrics, right? And and then on top of that, they threw in the video, which was completely National Lampoon meets the Flintstones meets Hanna-Barbera, that type of thing. And it was just cartoon. It was real life turned in, or cartoons turned into real life.
Very tongue in cheek, very silly.
Exactly. And of course, it was very, like, what does he say? It was Wile E. Coyote versus, the Roadrunner. And that was, the main actor, I can't remember what his name is, trying to chase after the band and chase after the kids and all that stuff. It was just, it was one of those things that was so far out of the norm of reality that it made no sense. But it was fun. It was tongue in cheek, like you said. And it's a song about, essentially rebellion, yes. But here's the ironic part. Politicians use that song today at every one of their freaking, rallies. I mean, come on. It's amazing to think about. They used this song, politicians, and it was a politician's wife who was trying to get it banned or stickered.
Well, because they're going to do anything that, gets them the vote, right? So they got to look cool.
Exactly.
And they're really losers, but whatever. I mean, honestly, it's really funny to think of now, because We're Not Going to Take It. is just, to me, a silly, goofy metal song. I always think of Twisted Sister as being kind of like that really corny metal band. Yeah, they have some songs that are kind of tough sounding, and D is a tough dude, but at the same time, like their whole shtick was dressing like over the top drag queens, right? So. Mm-hmm. And that's what it was at the time. Like, don't get mad at me for saying it. That's what they were trying to look like.
Absolutely.
It's funny to me that they got so bent out of shape about it. And I just love, again, if you haven't seen the video of him talking to the PMRC, it's amazing. So definitely to me was worthy of being spoke about last in this list, because even to my sister, who's not a metalhead, I remember watching a metal documentary and them talking about it, and she was impressed by it. So, and she's a lawyer, so
yeah, it's so hard to really point out. I agree with you. You know, Twisted Sisters, there's a corniness to it. There's a goofiness to it, and they're serious about it. But they went out of their way to make sure that this video was, and that the video for We're Not Gonna Take It and the video for I Want to Rock, they're companion videos.
And maybe I'm not being 100% clear. There's an intentional goofiness that they take seriously. It's hard to describe, right? It's not like goofy like Steel Panther, where they're just trying to be jackasses all the time. There is a level of shtick to it that is still to be taken seriously. Like, they stand behind what they do and you can respect it. It's not just like being goofy.
Absolutely. Exactly. That is exactly spot on at that point. All right. Well, that's the Filthy 15. So, there were a lot more songs than just these 15 that were pointed at and picked on by the PMRC. It was these that were made the big 15, the final list, and you can see from what we've talked about with the songs that there is definitely something to what they were trying to point out. But what was the point of pointing it out if no one was really paying attention for the most part? You know what I'm saying?
All they did was bring more attention to it.
Exactly. All they did was bring more attention. Now this, and the stickers on the albums just made the albums, for some artists, they went from being underground to platinum artists overnight. I mean, that's insane to think about. Rappers, you had all the nice hip hop rappers from the 80s that were, or the early 80s that were doing, street songs like Run DMC and the Sugar Hill Gang and LL Cool J. And then all of a sudden, this group out of LA, out of Compton, known as NWA, they went way off the deep end. And as soon as that album got a sticker on it, there you go. Now they're a platinum seller. Why? Because you brought attention to it. Somebody brought attention to it. And if they don't bring attention to it, they probably stay underground for at least another couple of years, maybe less. But who knows? That's the way history was written, and we can't change it.
Or can we? No, we can't.
No, we can't. All right, so that leads us now to our big four for the evening, and so we're finally going to address it. This is the last episode of 2022, so we're not good at paying attention to all the albums that come out all year long. We're not good at sitting there saying, "Oh, that album from January 15th that was released, that's one of the best albums of the year." You know what? No, there's so much music that comes out during the year. I can go down the entire list and say, "Ooh, this is a good album. This is a good album. This is a good album." Right? There's probably 20 good albums, maybe more. But we basically broke it down to our favorite 4 albums that came out this year. And so I'm going to go ahead and go first, since I think you went first last time for both things. I'm going to go ahead and go first this time. All right. So my big 4 albums of 2022. Number 4 for me is Amon Amarth's The Great Heathen Army. The song that takes it for me on this album is Vikings and Zaxxons, or Zaxxons Vikings. I can't remember which way it goes. That's how great, that's how much I love the song. It's Vikings Zaxxons. It's a duet with Biff Byford from Zaxxon, along with Johan from Amon Amarth, and it's a super cool song, and it's just one of those things that it was almost kind of like, this has been waiting, this should have happened years ago, but it happened now, so that's a really good album. Anyway, album number 3. This is a different one, and you're going to be surprised by this one from me, but I've listened to it a few times. I really, really like it, and it's one of those things that it actually inspired the band that these guys are former members of to kind of change a little bit of their sound heading into 2022 and 2023. Number 3 for me is The Halo Effect and Days of the Lost. Former members of In Flames. This album sounds like it could be an In Flames album, and it so much so that it inspired In Flames to basically kind of change their sound to sound like they used to sound back in the day. It's a lot of sound. All right, number 2 for me is Alter Bridge and their new album Pawns and Kings. It kind of goes back to their Fortress days. Just really good tunes, really heavy. I think there was a little bit of experimentation during Walk the Sky that kind of just left fans a little bit on the outside, but this one kind of brings them all back in again. And number 1 album for me for this year is Megadeth's The Sick, The Dying, and The Dead. They released 3 singles prior to the album being released, 3 videos. All 3 were excellent songs. You listen to the rest of the album, there are some really good tunes on there, and it is Dave Mustaine at his finest. One of the tunes on there they describe as being one of the fastest Megadeth songs that they have released, or that Dave has released. So it's a pretty good album. What do you got for your big 4?
I like your list, and we do have a little bit of crossover, but not 100%. And I do have an honorable mention, and I don't normally do this, but I wanted to mention this one. But because it's a re-recording of previous songs, I didn't want to count it as one of my big 4. But I really enjoyed Liberate the Inborn Humanity from Mors Principium Est. Basically, at one point, Andy Gillian had joined the band and replaced a lot of the original members. Now the original members are all kind of back together and have reformed the band. And they re-recorded some songs off their first 3 albums, and it sounds great. I really like it, but I didn't want to include it in my big 4 because it's not new material per se. So my number 4, though, is Hate Über Alles from Creator. And this is one that I really enjoyed. There's a couple songs that I thought were a little bit of a miss for me. They had a female vocalist come in and do some clean vocals on one of the songs, and I didn't really care for that. But overall, I really did like the album. I love Creator, have been a fan of them for a very long time, and it was nice to hear a new album, and it sounded great. So, but it just wasn't strong enough for it to be my number, be any higher than number 4 for me on this one. My number 3 is one we haven't really talked about much this year, but I really like the album. It's Circus of Doom from Battle Beast. As you know, and we've discussed in the past, I'm a big fan of Beast in Black. Beast in Black was a band that was formed out of Battle Beast because they kind of split ways with their guitarist, and he was pretty much the driving force of the band. But Nora, the singer from Battle Beast, is incredible in this particular album. She sounds even better than ever. And I was glad to hear this album because I felt like they kind of veered off track for me for a bit, but this album was great. So my number 2, what you had on your list, and I don't remember which number, but it's The Halo Effect with Days of the Lost. I was a huge fan of In Flames for their first few albums up until Clayman. There's some material that I do like after Clayman, but my fandom of the band really dropped off after that point because they very much changed their style, And like you said, the stuff that Halo Effect is doing, and they're all old members of In Flames from various eras, including Jesper Stromblad, which was the guy who started the band. It's In Flames has kind of diverged from the path that they were going down and is sounding a bit more like they used to, which is cool. Still not 100% to where they were before, and that's fine because people evolve and change. If you like it, you like it. If you don't, you don't. But Days of the Lost I thought was really fun. Not the best album I've ever heard by any means, but it was a really nice return to form. It was nice to hear these guys kind of get back into music again, because 3 out of 5 of them had retired for the most part. They were all doing different things. 2 of them own a brewery or something, or maybe it's just a bar. No, they're brewers. So, and then one of the guys had Jesper had dealt with some alcohol addiction problems, and he's still, in the process of dealing with all that, and doesn't play every show with them. But it's nice to see them kind of get back on track and do something that they feel passionate about, and that's you can feel that passion in this album. And my number one was your number one, which is Megadeth's The Sick, the Dying, and the Dead. After Dystopia, man, it's up there as one of my favorite Megadeth albums, surprisingly. But I absolutely love Dystopia, and I was... you're always a little bit apprehensive, I think, in some regard, whenever the next album's coming out. Is it going to be as good? Is it going to be... And no, to me, it's not 100% as good as Dystopia, but like you said, all 3 of their releases before the album came out were absolutely fantastic. I don't usually like rap rock combos. There's always exceptions to that, like Rage Against the Machine. But having Ice-T on one of the tracks, I thought was awesome. It sounded great. But it wasn't just the singles. It was all of the deeper cuts, all of the stuff that was released on the album that wasn't a single that I thought was absolutely fantastic. I love the meshing of the band members at this point. They really finding their groove together. Obviously there's that issue that they had with David Ellefson and him being kicked out of the band, and then the parts re-recorded. That's really too bad. Obviously there's always going to be that drama behind it, but it is what it is. The album still sounds great. They re-recorded the bass and it sounds fantastic. Everything about the album is really good, and if you haven't listened to it, give it a listen. I love me some Megadeth.
Yeah, no, Dave, the album's it's definitely a notch down from Dystopia, but it's still...
But not much.
Dystopia's...
Yeah.
Exactly. It was so up there that this one's pretty damn good album. All right, well, that is our big 4 albums for 2022, and this is the end of the episode, and this is the last show we have for you this year. So you should know the drill. Click like or subscribe, or just download the show to your favorite device and press play.
And don't forget to leave us a comment on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, or send us an email to debatingmetal@gmail.com. YouTube viewers, click subscribe and ring the bell to be notified when a new episode is posted. So tune in next year as we spark up another exciting metal debate. On behalf of Kenneth and myself, have a happy new year, stay safe, and always turn it up to 11.
Happy New Year. See ya.